The story of St. Peter Celestine.
Subscribe to our channel to receive more content like this.
Let me tell you a story about a man who didn't want power, didn't chase fame, and definitely didn't see himself as a leader. And yet, somehow, he became one of the most surprising popes in history. This is the story of Saint Peter Celestine, also known as Pope Celestine V, a man whose quiet heart changed the world, not through strength, but through humility. Let's begin. Peter was born around the year 1215 in a small town in Italy. He was the 11th child in a poor family. Life was hard. But Peter wasn't interested in money or fame. He had a hunger for something deeper. Even as a young boy, he loved to pray. He would go off by himself into the hills and talk to God in silence. As he grew older, that love for prayer only deepened. He decided to become a monk, but he didn't want to live in a busy monastery or follow a routine filled with meetings and rules. So Peter did something radical. He moved into a cave. Yes, a real cave, high in the mountains of central Italy. He lived there alone, in total silence for years. He slept on rocks. He fasted. He prayed. People started hearing about this strange, holy man living in the hills. They would climb up just to ask him for advice or prayers. And you know what? Peter welcomed them. He was gentle, wise, kind. Eventually, others wanted to follow his way of life. So Peter started a small group of monks, simple men who lived in silence and prayed together. They were called the Celestines, named after him. He didn't want attention, but God clearly had plans for Peter that were bigger than a cave. Now, here's where the story takes a turn. In the year 1294, the church was in chaos. The Pope had died, and for 2 whole years, no one could agree on who the next Pope should be. Politics, power struggles, divisions, nothing was working. People were growing desperate. And in the middle of all that, someone remembered the holy man in the mountains. Some church leaders thought, what if we chose someone completely pure? Someone outside of all the politics? So, believe it or not, they chose Peter. Yes, the old hermit in the cave. And when Peter heard this, he panicked. He didn't want the job. He was nearly 80 years old, had no experience running anything, and just wanted a quiet life with God. But the church begged him. They saw something in him that the world needed: humility, simplicity, and faith. So finally, Peter said yes. And just like that, in a huge procession with crowd cheering, Peter the Hermit was crowned Pope Celestine V. But here's the thing. Being Pope was overwhelming for him. He was used to silence, not politics, to caves, not castles. He didn't know how to manage the church's complicated affairs, and some people around him took advantage of that. He tried his best, but his heart longed for the quiet he had before. And after just 5 months, Peter made one of the boldest decisions any pope has ever made. He resigned. Yes, he stepped down. He said, "This is not what God wants for me." People were shocked, but Peter wasn't ashamed. He had followed his conscience, he had been faithful, and that was enough. He went back to the mountains, Sadly, his successor, Pope Boniface VIII, worried that Peter might become a threat, or that others might try to put Peter back in power. So Peter was placed under guard, and he spent the rest of his life in a small cell, once again living in silence and prayer. He died in 1296, but his story didn't end there. Peter was later named a saint, and today he's remembered not as a failed pope, but as a holy man who taught the world a powerful lesson. True leadership doesn't come from ambition. It comes from humility. He showed that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to step aside, to listen to God, to be small in a world obsessed with being big. So, if you ever feel like your quiet faith doesn't matter, or that you're not important enough to make a difference, remember St. Peter Celestine, a poor boy from the mountains who became Pope and taught the world that it's okay to let go. His life reminds us, greatness doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Thanks for listening to the story of St. Peter Celestine. Stay curious, stay humble, and don't be afraid to walk your own quiet path.